I'm J.D. Wolfhorst. I want to thank my collaborators, Monica Reyna, she's an undergraduate statistics sociology major at U of I, Stephanie Kane, the project manager at Social Sciences Research Unit, and Lee Bernacki, the postdoc that's been working with us on Objective 4. I'm going to give you a glimpse into some of our initial data, and this isn't the data a lot of you might be expecting that we have or even remembering, but it's the first data that we've got and a good opportunity for us to share some of it with you. You're going to see a bit longer version of this tomorrow. So we're not even going to go over methodology, but I want to focus on two concepts, the farm risk and food shortage variables that we measured within our general public survey this past fall. I followed the template, or at least as I understood it in instructions from Dave's design. So I'm going to give you a little bit of quick conceptual background here. Our biggest stakeholder, arguably, maybe not the most important depending on which dimension of the project we're focusing on, is the public. We can't forget about the public. We're all eaters, we all consume food, nobody's trying to starve themselves to death, so there's a connection between that stakeholder and our project that we wanted to create some base level data on. There's also a lot of unanswered questions about what the public views are on these issues within our region. The Pacific Northwest has not been a focus area within the country about these general issues and the politics surrounding it. So the relevance of these data to our research really gets into some of the relationships between consumers and producers that we also need to explore, what the consumers think about food system risk, ideas of food shortage, whether there's going to be change in the agriculture in the region, and whether some of those things are a function of climate change. So we've got some initial data on that. But all these relate to those larger debates that we see and hear about in the media all the time, such as communicating climate change. That's a critical component of our project that we're all trying to figure out. The politics of climate change, and then whether there's people out there, and we've got evidence of this already from our producer survey as well as within the public survey, of climate change denial, as well as the other end of that continuum. So this larger inquiry on the consumer to ag relationships is what we're just going to start to give you a window into today with a few result slides. First, these are just two different frequencies of the main variables that we measured within this that I'm showing you today. And the question asked was, within the Pacific Northwest, in the next 30 years, do you perceive that climate change will increase or lower the risk to these two different things, crop failure and food shortages? So what we see is a trend towards a greater perception of risk to both of these, but quite similar results with regard to the frequency distribution. So no striking difference between people's perception of risk about crop failure and food shortage, which that's one of the things we wanted to look at. But we do see a trend towards people perceiving greater perception of risk in relation to climate change over the next 30 years in the region. So this chart just cross-tabulates those two variables to try to give you a sense of which of the respondents were within one category on one variable and within the other. So again, remembering that most of the respondents tended towards a higher risk end of the scale, we see that that's happening with both variables. There's no statistically significant differences here that we're measuring. However, if we look at the no difference in food shortage risk, we see as an example that most of the people that also indicated no difference with regard to risk of crop failure end up in that same no difference category. So these are data that we're analyzing in order to try to understand those trends within the public on these conceptual issues. Looking at just the food shortage variable now cross-tabulated with whether people have a general concern about climate change overall, we see again a tendency towards the higher risk end of the scale, but we also see that for those that were greatly concerned about climate change, there's a strong correlation with also perceiving a much higher risk within the food shortage in the future. Within those that perceive no difference in that risk for the future, we see a much lower concern, and indicating the strongest category of not concerned at all about climate change. So that's a predictable outcome, but now we have data that can back that up about the respondents in the region. So again, we're going to show you a lot more tomorrow about the methodology, but one of the things that we have within these data that we created within the sampling stratification scheme was the ability to look at the data with regard to rural respondents versus urban respondents. So this is just a breakdown of that rural versus urban split within the respondents looking at the crop failure variable. And what we find is an interesting result that there's hardly any difference between rural and urban. And when we tell you more about the actual distribution of those respondents tomorrow and actually map that out so you can visually see where the people that answered these surveys are from, then this result might be more telling with regard to some differences that we might have expected within the region that are not showing up. So what that story is something that we continue to explore in a multivariate way within these data. So quickly, just to give you a sense, we're going to be doing a comprehensive report that will be linked on the web from the Social Science Research Unit. We'll be running all kinds of statistics and bivariate analyses with these, plan to pursue academic articles and publish those within the year. We've also got opportunity here for some outreach venues to start to get these data in front of policymakers in different forums and interest group discussions that I think should start, given that these data are fresh. They're directly in relation to climate change and agriculture in the region. Last, I just want to point out that our data, and some of you are more familiar with this about the Agricultural Producer Survey, which we'll also reference tomorrow, we've been trying to integrate across the project with different objective teams with how these data could be used. So we're both a platform and a portal within the project for integration, but that doesn't mean we can do all that integration within our objective team or within the Social Science Research Unit. But we'd like to start collaborating with you, and we'll show you an exercise tomorrow that'll start some of those conversations. So thanks a bunch.